Hey everyone, Michael Alm here. I'm working on a set of floating shelves this week. These are maple floating shelves for a friend's kitchen. It's actually a kitchen that I built last summer, and this is the final touch, so I'm really excited to get these installed. This is my go-to technique for building floating shelves. It's a pretty simple design that I think most people with a table saw can do, so I hope you'll stick around and see how they're made. What I was doing there real quick, I milled these down to thickness. So they started out as a little fat of 3/4 and now they are at 5/8. The reason I did that was because that's gonna make the shelf just a little bit lighter and a little bit thinner. So that's good. And then I also jointed the boards on the table saw. If you have a board that's really close to square, you can run it through multiple passes, flipping it over and turning it around, and just nibble off the sides, and gradually you kind of bring it into square. It's not a perfect technique, but for this application, it works really well. Okay, so I've cut 3 out of the 4 boards. These 2 are gonna form the long shelf. Note that I cut it mirrored, so this piece was cut with the miter facing out, and then the other piece was cut with the miter facing in towards the sled. That way, when they're put together, they match up. The other one, which is the shorter shelf, I just made out of 1 board, and I mitered it on both ends, and then I can cut through the middle to get the length. And then the last board I left untouched, and this is the board that I'll use to get the end pieces on either end. All right, so I bailed on that cut, and I bailed on it for a couple different reasons. Partly, I was just getting too much stress. This board was stressing against the blade and pinching, so you can see how much burn I was getting inside of there. That's because the blade is pinching. The other thing that I was having trouble with was actually exerting enough force to keep the workpiece down. So what I've done now is I've attached a feather board to the fence, and that should do all the work of pushing it down. So all I have to do is push it through the cut and keep it against the fence. Okay, this is what I have so far. Everything is milled up and ready for glue. These parts, you'll notice that I've left a little bit long, and I've done that so that after the glue up, I can trim them to fit. So I've got these sanded to 120 and they're looking really good. One thing that I did notice is that this corner right here is sort of cupping up a little bit, and I need to take care of that now before I go any further. So what I've done, I've cut a spacer block that I'm gonna glue into place here, and that'll hold the two sides together so they won't spread anymore. So much better. It's perfectly square all the way down now. I think this is gonna make for a much easier install and a lot less likelihood of it cupping and warping. All right, there's one more thing that I wanna do before the final sand, and this is a trick that you are gonna thank me for. Whenever you glue up a really long miter like this, it's almost impossible to get a perfect fit. And usually there's a couple spots that get little gaps in them, like here. So one thing that a lot of people do is they fill it with wood filler, but it tends to be a pretty weak spot to have wood filler in, and it doesn't really hold that well. The trick that I was taught, this isn't my trick, but I was taught it by a better woodworker than me, is that you take a screwdriver and you run it along the miter, and that burnishes the edge up, it rounds it over, and it makes for a gap-free joint. So check it out.
So pretty. You love them?
Yeah, they turned out really good.
The brass in so nicely too.
Yeah, it's a good tone for that.
Sweet, dude.
All right. Style drill bits. They work really well. I like to put a sponge on top of it as I use it, and that just keeps the bit cool. Kitchen is finally done, and this was a massive project that unfortunately didn't really make it onto YouTube. It is on Instagram in my stories, so you can go check that out. At the end of this video, I'll post some photos of the before, during, and after of building up this house, because it was a huge undertaking and it looks so nice now. So if you have any questions about how this was constructed or anything like that, feel free to ask me in the comments down below, and Other than that, follow my Instagram if you want to see more of what I'm doing on a daily basis, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye.